morning. Thank you for coming to our panel presentation on career in the justice studies field. During the month of October, we are being reminded of special awarenessness, such as domestic violence awareness, breast cancer awareness, and many others. But in October, we also celebrate information literacy, and as my ARP bulletin told me, health literacy month. So I looked up the definition of literacy, and turned out the word literacy was first used around 1860, and it means knowledge, education, erudition. And its antonym is ignorance. So a person literate is someone who possesses a knowledge or competence in a particular area. Today's panel discussion, we do hope that you are going to gain that literacy in the career or profession of justice studies. We are honored today to host 6 panelists. The 6th one is coming, and they are representing different areas of legal and justice studies field. I'm going to start with the ladies. So Ms. Rachel Jaffe is the Assistant General Counsel and Assistant Vice President for Compliance at Berkeley College. Earlier, Ms. Jaffe was Deputy Counsel to the Inspector General for the New York City Housing Authority. And prior to this, she practiced various fields of law. Ms. Mary Catherine Ryan, she is the Senior Assistant Prosecutor in charge of the Passaic County Prosecutor's Office Public Integrity Unit, and which handles internal affairs and official misconduct cases. And I also heard about white-collar crimes, yes? And her boss was our commencement speaker 2 years ago, Ms. Camelia Valdez. Mr. Eric DeHope, he's a retired police officer who previously was with the Glen Police Department. Honorable William Franks is currently a town justice in Stony Point, New York, and a former police officer with the whole career. And Mr. Robert McGuire, he's a retired detective sergeant with 26 years of experience with the crime scene investigation. And he's also Assistant Director of Public Safety and the National Academy of Medicine. And he's also a certified professional trainer. I like this one. And we are waiting for one more person, Mr. Homer Mosley, who retired from Verizon, and he is the senior consultant in investigation and counseling. All right. So, the goals of today's presentations is to become literate, as I said, knowledgeable about the variety of opportunities in the justice or legal profession. We will ask each panelist to describe your career, the opportunities and obstacles you encounter, and share some tips and tricks how to enter and prosper in the field. We'll try to stay within 5 to 7 minutes limit for each presenter. And after each presenter, you can ask questions, or you can hold with the questions till the end. All right? This session is being recorded for our online students. We do have a very sophisticated microphone on the table, so it picks up all the noise. So I'm going to say as a librarian, please keep it low. And thank you again to our presenters for being with us today. Let us start. Can we start from this side of the table?
You know, when I sat down, I realized there was a danger of sitting on the end and
I'm happy you started.
Having to speak first. So my name is Bill Franks. I was a police officer for 29 years. I started with the Rockland County Sheriff's Department, actually with Clark Hill. We go back to the early 70s. And I was hired by the town of Stony Point. I worked as a police officer. I worked for 29 years there. I spent 17 of my 29 years as a detective sergeant, supervisor, working all major cases. And then I finished my last 6 years as chief of department. I was working on 9/11, 2001. Rockland County, we sent New York City about 75 police officers within the first 3 hours. And when 2002 came, and that was my planned retirement, based on what was going on at the time, I really didn't want to retire, but that had been my plan. So I retired and I volunteered for an anti-terrorist analytical group for about 1.5 years. And what our function was at that time was to identify targets. We have many power plants. We had a propane distribution plant that was very volatile. We looked at things like the Tappan Zee Bridge. Would that be a target? Would it be a target for mass casualties? Would it be a target for disruption of services, disruption of emergency response? We have Indian Point directly across from Stony Point. So there were many issues that we identified. We worked with the local police departments, with the commercial enforcement units, deciding we knew that somebody couldn't just get up in a plane again and say, you know, everybody's going to be all right, just sit down. We knew that that would not be a tactic. We believed that dirty bombs or truck bombs. So we identified those areas and we conducted training and enforcement to protect our nation. As I was deciding what I wanted to be when I grow up, the local judge decided that he was going to retire. So I ran for town justice in the town of Stony Point. And just very quickly, I am the only non-attorney judge in the county of Rockland, because we have quite a few attorneys in Rockland. But in New York State, there are approximately 2,200 town and village justices, and about 70% of them are non-attorneys. This system started very early when we were part of England, but colonies, and we did not have court systems. They would elect pillars of the community, people that knew the community, that were respected in the community, to decide cases of drunken disorderly assault, property disputes, merchant disputes, and also the more serious crimes like your rape and robberies. The magistrate would decide whether there was enough probable cause to hold those people to send them back to the Supreme Courts of England. So when we broke away from England, we've kept the magistrates, and actually the only other place that and when we set up our county and Supreme Courts, they're all attorney positions, but the only other one that I could sit on is actually the Supreme Court of the United States, where you need not be an attorney. And I know that's surprising to a lot of people. But I've been serving as a town justice for 12 years. I've certainly learned quite a bit about the justice system, and I am actually running for re-election. It's an elected position in New York. So I'll be happy to answer questions about that later on, but I think I took my 5 minutes, and I'll turn it over to you.
Good morning. My name is Mary Catherine Ryan. I'm an assistant prosecutor in Passaic County. I'm currently in charge of our public integrity unit, which handles internal affairs and official misconduct cases. We also overlap with the financial crimes portion of our office and insurance fraud. So we collectively handle all of the white collar matters that go through Passaic County. My focus, though, is on the official misconduct and violations of public trust crimes. I started in the office in the domestic violence unit. Then I was rotated to our pre-indictment and grand jury unit and our trial unit. Our trial unit is really the most active portion of our office in terms of interaction with the public and interaction with the judges and attorneys and litigants on an everyday basis. So our trial unit handles the variety of cases you might expect, drugs, robberies, assaults, sexual assaults, everything. So we've got quite a lot on our hands in Passaic County. It's a populous county, and there's a lot of activity to deal with. I went to law school after studying international politics and international law in college, and I found myself drawn towards matters involving human rights and war crimes and genocides and the construction of international war tribunals. And I liked the idea that criminal justice systems are built to protect rights on both sides, both the rights of the people accused and the rights of the people who've been injured. So I found myself drawn to law school and to criminal law in particular. I became a prosecutor because as I sort of went through this process of schooling, I liked the idea of being able to work with victims and being able to help build stronger communities, because something that gets lost sometimes as we go through criminal cases is that there are crimes that affect not just individual people, but also crimes that affect communities, like the sale of drugs and the proliferation of guns. So I liked being able to be on the prosecutor side and working with victims. The defense side is equally important. Any of you who are considering careers in criminal law in particular, the defense side is equally important. It has a vital function, which is to protect the rights of a person accused. And you need both sides to be able to work properly to really have an effective criminal justice system. So I'm, again, happy to answer any questions at the end of the panel about criminal law in particular, about prosecuting or being a defense attorney. And for those of you who are considering a career in the law, it's a big commitment, time-wise, financial-wise. It's certainly something to think through. Maria asked us to talk about some obstacles. The financial aspect is certainly an obstacle, and it's certainly something to keep in mind. But it's also doable if it's something that you're passionate about and something that you're committed to. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Eric DeHope. I was a police officer in Glen, New Jersey, which is in Essex County. I began my career, I've been retired for 2 years. I began my career as a dispatcher for Glen with really no intention to ever become a police officer. I just was going to become a dispatcher and see where everything went. But once I started working around the police officers, it piqued my interest, and I decided I wanted to become a police officer. At the time, and Glen is a chief's test. There are two types. There's civil service and chief, if you're deciding to become a police officer. It was a little different back then. It was more of a handshake and a pat on the back. I never took a test. They just said, we want to hire you as a police officer. Would you be interested in going to the police academy? At that time, I said absolutely. Then I went to the police academy, came out, was in patrol, basically handled calls, all different calls, ambulance calls, everything. That's what we did. It was a small town, 7,000 people, upper middle class, really no businesses. I did do 2 years in the detective bureau. I was the juvenile detective. I had to deal with the juvenile matters, which is a whole different ball of wax. I don't have a college background. I would suggest if you're going to become a police officer to get your degree, or at least if you get hired, get your degree, because a lot of departments require it these days, and they also have incentives if you have a college degree. You get a stipend for that. It's ironic, I went to the academy with Bob McGuire at the end, so we actually know each other. And both of my sons, they're police officers now. They decided to follow in my footsteps. Like I said, some of the obstacles you're going to encounter if you want to become a police officer would probably be at this time. A lot of people are going for the jobs, and it's back in about 4 years ago, police departments stopped hiring. Now they're rehiring, so you will have that chance. Like I said, chief tests are different because you're going to have to apply to that department, and they're going to give you some type of test. Civil service is a test the state provides, and there's a list that you would go on. Could be if you live in, just say, Passaic, they're going to hire Passaic residents first, and then they'll go to the county. So if anyone's deciding to become a police officer, I would suggest taking the civil service as soon as you can, because there's a 2-year window, 2-3-year window that they give the test. So if you take it now, you can actually become a police officer, and then you get your college degree as you're going along. Right now, I retired. I'm still working for the Glen Police Department at times. I'm dispatching still when they need me, and that's about it.
Hi, I'm Rachel Adler Jaffe. I work here at Berkeley. I'm the Assistant General Counsel and Assistant Vice President for Compliance here. I've been here just about 5 years now. And at the college, like I said, I have 2 hats. So the legal side of my job is what you might think of as what a lawyer would do. I negotiate contracts for the college. I manage litigation when the college is sued. I work with outside attorneys. I also dispense legal advice on a variety of issues. I never really know who's gonna call and what they're gonna ask, which keeps it very interesting. The compliance side, which is much more sort of the higher education aspect of the job, is keeping the college in compliance with federal law, state law, and we're in New York and New Jersey, so that's 2 states. And then local law. And New York City, since we're in New York City, is like its own country, frankly. So there's a lot of laws that we have to constantly keep on our minds with New York City. So it's a very diverse, interesting, challenging job. I don't have a background in higher education, so I have a very diverse background. I'm going to try to go through 20 years of background in 4 minutes. When I graduated law school, I worked for a law firm, I went to Albany Law School, and I stayed in Albany for about 4 years after I graduated. The first firm I worked for, I practiced defense litigation, primarily medical malpractice defense. So we represented doctors and hospitals that were sued for medical malpractice, and also product manufacturers, so product liability cases. And I learned about litigation in New York State. And after doing that for about 2 years, I decided I didn't think I wanted to be a litigator. As much as I liked the work, I didn't think I wanted to try cases. So I thought I might prefer advising clients in a more preventative kind of work, keeping them out of trouble. So then I switched to a firm representing healthcare providers. I've always had a thing with healthcare. I've always loved healthcare. So this was representing healthcare providers, ensuring that they stay in compliance with Medicare and Medicaid fraud and abuse law, which was a very specialized regulatory field. I had no background in that. I learned it. It was challenging. It was interesting work. And then I decided I wanted to get out of Albany and move to New York City. So I tried to find a job in New York City doing healthcare work. Could not find anything quickly enough. So did a lot of networking, which is hugely important, by the way, networking. Talked to everybody I knew, family, friends, and wound up getting an interview at McCarter & English, which is, I think, New Jersey's still its largest law firm, doing trademark law. Again, no experience in trademark law. This is quite common with lawyers, at least it was 10, 20 years ago, that you could just switch practice areas as long as you were driven and interested in learning new fields of law. So I did trademark law for a few years, and that was really interesting work. I don't know if you know much about trademark work, but it's basically a trademark is a company's name or logo, and we represented clients who were being sued for trademark infringement, and we also represented clients who wanted to sue other companies for infringing their trademarks, and helped our clients register trademarks, and it was really interesting work. I liked it a lot, but decided at that point I didn't like law firm life. So that was 6 years of 3 different firms, and the trouble was really with the law firm practice. It was the billable hour. I don't know if you've heard of billable hour requirements, but when you work for large law firms on the defense side, the way that they make their money is by billing their clients. And so you had to document every, I spent 15 minutes researching topic X. I spent 20 minutes talking to client A about matter Y. I spent 30 minutes driving to court. And you had to document every second of your time and submit it every week. And there was a lot of pressure, frankly, to get those hours high. So, for example, you could do a great job, produce great work, but not meet your quota. And that was a really depressing kind of experience for me. So again, I did a lot of soul searching, talked to everybody I knew, went to a career counselor who focused on lawyers, and decided I would try working for the public sector because I'd never done that before. So after talking to a million people and figuring out some things, I wound up getting an interview with the New York City Housing Authority Inspector General's office, and I think work somewhat similar to what you described. The New York City has what's called the Department of Investigation. It's just sort of like internal affairs for city government, and every city agency has an inspector general that investigates fraud, corruption, crimes within that city agency, and they all report to the Department of Investigation, an independent office within the city of New York. So I was working for the New York City Housing Authority Inspector General. I came in as, I think I was called investigative attorney. I worked there for 5 years, and by the time I left, I was deputy counsel to the Inspector General. That was the most interesting job, Randy, I'm sorry, close your ears. The most interesting job I've ever had because I was an investigator / attorney and I had my own cases and basically made sure, well, I was supposed to try to ensure that everybody within the organization complied with the city ethics rules, and if there were allegations of fraud or corruption or crimes involving housing authority officials or residents living in the developments or vendors doing business with the housing authority, it was my job to investigate those cases, and if I had evidence of a crime, refer it to the local, whichever prosecutor had jurisdiction. So that was my first experience with criminal law. Again, I had no background going in, but you can see a trend here, which is basically if you do well and thrive and articulate well and write well and work hard, you can do well in any area of law that you have an interest. How I wound up here, so I took some time off. I had 2 kids and did a little part-time work doing employment law, which I also had never done before, and that I loved. So anyway, a family member of mine is a professor here, and about 5 years ago, the college was looking for a compliance, I think it was an administrative position. They weren't even looking for a lawyer. But the chief compliance officer, who is a lawyer, who's our general counsel here now, knew that he wanted a lawyer, was hoping that he would get a lawyer. And I interviewed for the position. And again, no higher education background, but it didn't matter to him because he knew from my work at the Department of Investigation and all the prior jobs that I knew how to think, I knew how to speak, I knew how to write, I knew how to analyze, and so, he took a chance on me, and I learned the higher education stuff, which is insane. It's so, there are so many laws and regulations, it'll make your head spin, but it's been a really interesting job here because we basically built the office. There wasn't a compliance office, there wasn't a legal office. I would argue that the college needed one, and now they have one. Because there's so much going on with regulation of higher education right now, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I think I've gone way over my 7 minutes, but it's been 20 years of 5 careers, so
You took half of my speech.
sorry about that. Thanks.
Real quick, my extension's 1188. Okay, I'm Robert McGuire. I'm the Assistant Director of Public Safety here. Like Mr. DeHope said, we went to school together. I was a cop for 26 years in Kearney. I spent most of my career making sure kids who screwed up stayed on the right path. It was always important to me that if a kid made a little bit of a bump, that really didn't mess up his life map. You know what I mean? Like, all right, you did it, you're wrong. We can get past this as much as we can so you can still go on to college, you can still go on to have a job. And to me, that was probably the most important part about being a cop, is taking care of kids. Prior to coming here, I was in charge of 7 campuses, 7 different schools, from K to 12. During that 26 years, I was the first guy they chose to be the DARE guy. I was a 26-year-old guy, young street cop. And they're like, you want the DARE program? I'm like, no. I want to drive fast. I want to, jump through fences, and I want to, tackle people and put them in prison. It was the best thing they ever did to me. Helping kids and helping people, if you get inside law enforcement, is the most rewarding thing you're going to ever do. I never shot anybody, thank goodness. I pulled my gun on a guy. I had a guy open a van door, point one at me. It wasn't a great day. But it's helping people there's no better feeling. There really isn't. If you can, during your business day as a cop, you can help Mrs. Jones in the house with her groceries because she's 80-year-old and struggling. And the next thing you know, you're on a rooftop chasing the guy who just broke into an apartment complex. And next thing you know, you're running into a fire. That's a pretty cool day. You know what I mean? And don't let anybody tell you that times have changed in law enforcement. Times have changed. You don't want to get involved in it now. It's a lie. It's a great job. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. I was a 24-year-old kid who scored the job. It was like Mr. DeHope said, his route went one way. I was a civil service hire. Okay, I did well in a civil service exam. I got hired. We went to school together, like I said. And then during my career, I was the DARE guy. I worked narcotics. I spent a lot of time in juvenile. I was one of the high school resource officers. I went out alone and spent some time with NYPD in their gang intel unit. I went to John Jay for HIDTA, which is high intensity drug trafficking. And you just receive a wealth of knowledge from people. And it just makes your career so much more fun. If you do, like they said before, you show up for work, you have a good work ethic, you write well, you speak well, you present the department well, they're willing to push you to the forefront and let you be seen, okay? Don't embarrass them. Don't embarrass yourself. Don't embarrass your family. When you're going to in this job, you're going to see things. You're going to see a bucket load of money. You're going to see a bucket load of drugs. You're going to see dead people that can't tell you that can't tell anybody that you may have taken it. But what's going to happen if you do take that? What's going to happen, ethically to you? Like, where's your morals? Like, those are the cops that we want to see and get rid of. Okay, when we talk about law enforcement now and everything's on the web, cop did this bad, cop did that bad, cop did this bad. Did you see the dance off of the lady? Let me see the dance off of the lady cop dancing with the girl today in the street, right? Like, that was the stuff I would do. Like, I see kids playing wiffle ball. I'd stop. Like, I was on a pedal bike for a while. I'd dump the pedal bike and play wiffle ball for a half hour. I had a police radar. They didn't call me. You know what I mean? That's what you want to do. If you want to get in the law enforcement side, you better be willing to help the community that you're working with. It's just not pay. You know what I mean? It's just, if you do that, you'll suck at it. That's the easiest way to do it. And you'll hate it. All right? If you give to the community, they'll take you in a heartbeat. Like, I was a Kearney kid. I was raised there. My mom's still there. And it was a great job for me. My son just became a cop in Verona. I retired May 1st. I started here at Berkeley May 4th. Okay, so I was retired a whopping day. They go, you're off Friday. So I walked the mall, like retired people do. But then we got white Velcro sneakers. But I was lucky enough to prepare for a plan B too. I was lucky, like I said, I got 23 when I got hired. I was going to walk out at 48, but I didn't know what to do. So I said I got my certification to be a personal trainer. I was going to do that. I still compete. I still do things like that. You still want to stay fit, okay? You still want to, again, present yourself as like, this guy's put together. When you walk into some place and you see a train wreck walk in, we're like, this is going to help me? The kid just jumped the fence. That's not the way you want to do it. You really want, no matter you pick a career as an attorney, you walk in squared away, people are like, oh, this lady's in charge, okay? You put you a little bit ahead of the game. I give you a lot of credit for choosing this career. Like I said, it's a tough time to get into now. Everybody wants to get into it. You're not getting a lot of support sometimes from a lot of people. There is a lot of cop bashing. Attorneys have always felt that at times. You say attorney, sometimes people are like, ugh. But she's a terrific lady. She's a role model for people who want to be attorneys here. But don't, I know, it's probably giving back, they said. But don't let anybody tell you can't do it. Take the civil service exam. There's pre-tests. There's groups that you may have to save up a couple bucks to take that. Take that class. Prepare yourself for that exam. It's only 2 years, so you better nail that because there's going to be 2 more years to have to take it again. Okay, but put yourself first regarding this career. I have a house. I got kids. I got cars. I never thought this was going to happen to me. I really turned out a lot better than most people expected. A lot better than I thought I was going to expect, that I expected. And when I got towards the end of my career, like I said, I had the personal trainer thing lined up. I applied here to Berkeley. I met with my boss, and I came back for a second interview, and I was actually on vacation when they called an offer me a job here. So I've only been here 6 months. My main job here is to make sure you guys are cool. Anything happens on campuses, that's kind of my gig. I'll respond. I handle all New York and New Jersey here. Any issues inside the schools, I take care of. Again, it's 1188 is my extension. Call me. You want life, career advice, I'm here. And the email is robert.mcguire@berkeleycollege.edu.
Well, good morning. First of all, I apologize for being here. I got my time mixed up. I thought I was supposed to be here 10:30, and then, as you know, this is rush hour traffic, so and construction, and then I missed the building. But in any event, my name is Homer Mosley. I guess most of my career I spent in I guess human resources, private security. I'm both a security professional and a human resources professional. I started you could say my security career as a North Police narcotics detective. I did that about 4.5 years. And unfortunately, I got caught in a time where there was a lot of layoffs. I got called back twice, and on the third round, I said, that's it. I was trying to support a family and said, okay, I wasn't going to go with that anymore. So I actually went into management. I always had an inkling towards going into management. I wanted to diversify my career, and that's one of the things I like to talk to you about diversification. But I worked for Pathmark for a little while. I've also worked at Beth Israel Medical Center as a security officer, and I was involved with investigations as well as a supervisor. I did that for a short period of time in between layoffs. I eventually made my way to Verizon, where I started my career in security. I was what you call a security representative, investigating toll fraud, third-party billing fraud, that sort of thing. I did that for about seven years, and it was an opportunity to go into human resources. Again, I have a psychology background. That was my undergraduate degree. So I went into human resources, and the thing about it is I transferred my investigation skills to human resources, and I became what you call a senior EEO management consultant, which was a next level, a managerial position. So, in other words, the skills that you acquire can be transferred. That's one of the main points I wanted to talk to you about. As you build your skills, never think in terms of limiting the things that you can do. I mean, law enforcement has a variety of things. But anyway, I did 17 years, and I took an early retirement out in 2003. After investigating EEO discrimination complaints, I actually represented the company. I worked with attorneys. I actually wrote the company position statements. I negotiated settlement agreements. I was involved in several lawsuits representing the company. And some of the investigations were really high level. But I left that job, and I eventually ended up working, and this is important too. I left that job, and I actually worked as a security guard. Now, I have a master's degree in human resources from the Stillman School of Business, Seton Hall University. My undergraduate was psychology. But I took a job as a security officer working for a company called Metro One, which is retail. They do high-end like Gucci and Coach bags. So I looked like a salesperson in a black uniform, black tie, but basically I was minding the store. It just so happens that I volunteered to become a weekend supervisor. So I was a security guard during the week. On the weekend, for a few extra dollars, I became a supervisor for like 2 days. That allowed me, and this shows you what happened, that allowed me to go to a send-off party at the Whiskey Cafe, okay? They would get a person by the name of Sean was leaving the company. He was a district manager. Well, of course, you have to be able to talk, and I got to meet the owner of Metro One, okay? Yes, Metro One. As a result of that meeting, all right, I explained to the person my credentials, my background, and next thing I know, I was being interviewed. I became an operations manager, had my own office over in New York, and later on, I became a recruiter. So I actually hired security officers. I actually operated out of the trunk of my car. I had uniforms. I not only put in for the ads to find the security officers. I actually came to schools like Berkeley and other Lincoln Tech looking for candidates. But I actually interviewed them, drug tested them because we had the portable drug test them, did the background checks, made sure they had the credentials, because in New York you have what you call the 8 and 16 certificates. In New Jersey, as you know, is SORA. Did the background checks, did the orientation and training, because I taught retail security. How do you detect shoplifters? How do you deter shoplifters? How do you approach shoplifters? Did the training, reached into the trunk of my car and uniformed them and sent them on their assignments. So I was like a one-man HR department for Metro One, and I was upstate New York. But even prior to that, I worked for Citigroup as a site manager, answering to the second in command, who, again, because of my skill sets and the fact that he could place confidence in me, I actually represented him as the director of security for Citigroup. So then the last one, because I had 4 post-retirement jobs. One was a consultant for Verizon, but my last job was I just left NJCU as a security supervisor, NJCU, New Jersey City University, as a security supervisor back in December. And a lot of people don't really know, a lot of people, when they say security, they take a sort of dismal view, I mean, I did that as a police officer. When I got hired for Verizon, I wasn't take the job because in terms of my mindset, in terms of a lot of law enforcement mindsets who really didn't know at that time, was a security guard or a security represented a person who was a wannabe and who had a fake gun on their side. Well, let me just tell you, there's a very lucrative career out there in terms of private security, okay? And you'd be surprised how much you make in terms of a security officer, security supervisor at a public institution like NJCU. I left not for any other reason except I just wanted to move on, but the pay was really good for a post-retirement job. And security directors are making $150,000. Okay, so all that is to tell you that, sometimes your career path doesn't have to be linear. In other words, just one way. Sometimes you take a step sideways, a step back to propel your career further. Okay, and every skill set that you acquire, okay, never underestimate the skill sets that you acquire. For example, I took my investigatory skills and turned them into becoming a senior EEO management consultant for Verizon.
So, now becoming the judge at Stony Point, now that was based solely on the fact that you knew the law, or?
Okay, the question was, how did I become a judge in Stony Point? In New York, your town and village justices are elected positions. Many of your Supreme Court are also elected positions. But it is not a requirement to be an attorney to be a town or village justice. What I did bring was my 29 years of law enforcement. I'm a graduate of the FBI National Academy and very familiar with the community. And it's called the courts closest to the people. So knowing your community, knowing what's going on in the community is very important. And actually, New York State, the Office of Court Administration, has a team of lawyers in Albany that is available to all town and village justices, whether they be attorneys or non-attorneys, to answer any legal questions that you may not be able to easily reference. So we can call them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week and get their advice. And that's what they do all the time, is answer questions for the town and village justices. So very seldom do you give them a question that they haven't heard before. One of our big problems right now are sovereign citizens who believe that they are above the law, that we have no jurisdiction over them. And we've had quite a bit of problems with sovereign citizens in New York and I'm sure elsewhere in the nation. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
The only other thing I wanted to say, and I know we're probably going to run short on time, the things you're doing right now will affect you the rest of your life. It's great to have technology, but I want to remind you that what you're placing on Facebook, what you're doing on emails, what you're sending on text, employers are going to look at that somewhere down the line. And it may not be that funny when you're looking for a job and they see you hanging out with your friends and there's bongs and drugs or whatever is in there. And a lot of people have had this come back to haunt them. So there's an old saying that say it and forget it, write it and regret it. What you are placing out there right now will probably follow you the rest of your life. And you really need to be careful and looking at what you want to be later on. So I just caution you against things that you may think are funny now may seriously affect you in the future.
Is anybody here bilingual? Make sure when you put your resume together, you tell everybody that. Use that to your advantage. Use the fact that you speak different languages. I know when you get into questions, everybody's like, I ain't asking that anyway. Been there. But you know, for all of our departments, we need people like you. And if you become a cop and you're bilingual, you're an asset. If you're a female bilingual, you're a double asset. If you're trilingual, if you're not, take one of those classes online. Take a course here. Or take a course somewhere that says, I've learned Spanish as my second language. I've learned, any other language, just to add to your resume. Make sure when you put your resume together, it's just not blah. Show your positives. Don't be afraid to really, it's your one chance to brag and make money at the same time. You know what I mean? You're basically going to say, listen, I'm Bob McGuire, and I'm awesome. Just ask me. You know what I mean? And I'm going to share it to you. I'm going to put it right here on paper and tell you that I'm awesome. But if you don't do that, then you're just on a pile. You have to say something that separates you from, if I was going to hire one person out of the 35 here, of course I'd hire Mr. Lewing, but no, you have to really, what separates you? And that's what you have to do. And you're at a point now where you guys are young enough to make that plan. Lay it out. Okay, I was an Irish kid, growing up in Kearney. But when I ran an after-school program, I had the Spanish girls in that after-school program put together a dozen police sayings that I learned in Spanish. And it worked. I had guys in the car, I had them laying on the ground in Spanish. Probably saved my life. You know what I mean? So prepare yourself. Make sure you, again, when you go to jobs, sell yourself, but start laying the groundwork. You guys are still young, and so when a door does open, or you see the door open, you're ready just to bust through it.
And Catherine, I have a question. Work in a prosecutor's office. Are all the positions legal that you have to have a law degree? Is there some kind of career path that does not require to be a lawyer?
Absolutely. The prosecutor's office has many departments because we handle all different kinds of crimes within the limited world of criminal law. But we have attorneys, we have investigators, and we have our clerical staff. And all of us have to work together to really make our cases successful. So I believe at this point, the hiring requirements for our office are that no matter which area you're entering, you need a college degree or military equivalent experience. For the attorney positions, you have to go to law school. For clerical and investigators, law school is not a requirement. But for each area, what we look for and what makes successful employees are people that work hard, pay attention to details, know how to interact with each other. For us, it's very important that we have people who know how to interact with the public. We handle a lot of situations that are probably the worst day of people's lives. And so you need to be able to speak to somebody without knowing who they are, knowing their story, but still be able to be respectful, pay attention to what they're saying, be empathetic with their experience. And those are skills that translate in every part of our office and really in every job that you're going to do. And Mr. McGuire talked about keeping your moral compass straight, and I think that that's so important in any career, especially within our office. There's a lot of gray sometimes in criminal justice, and it's important to stay centered. So again, that's a career skill that you can bring to any career you do, because that's a personal asset. That's something about you that you can make work to your advantage in any career you choose. So if you're interested in joining someplace like the prosecutor's office or even police departments, there's going to be a variety of jobs that are legal, that are investigative, that are clerical, that all have to work together to make the system work as a whole. So there's definitely a spot. There's a spot for everyone if you have an idea of what you want to do. And I think that's important also. I think you've heard that as a theme through all of the panelists, that if you find something you like, follow it. Listen to that little voice in your head, because you'll work harder, you'll be more productive, you'll be happier, and there are ways to take what you like to do and make it into something that can support a family, that can support your own future. But I think the cornerstone of any successful career is following something you like, because it'll make you happy and it'll make you want to go to work.
The importance of networking was discussed earlier. Are there professional organizations students can get involved with now to start that process?
I like to take that on because every time I participate in a panel, I always talk to people about as is. How many people here are as is members? Right? Okay. As is stands for the American Society of Industrial Security. It's the world's largest private security organization in the world. It's international. Okay, I'm what you call a CPP. I'm a Certified Protection Professional, and that's something whereas you have to have a degree, you have to have X amount of experience before you can sit for the exam, and the exam is all day long. They usually you have specialized areas in which you take the exam, as well as a general body of knowledge. Did you know as a student you can join that organization at a substantial discount? I mean, really a substantial discount, and you get all of the rights and privileges of a professional member like myself. For example, they have a resume service. If you could put your resume in the job bank, the resume job bank, you get a magazine called Security Management. Have any of you seen Security Management? Nobody's seen Security Management. Security Management is a very professional, award-winning magazines with various topics on security issues, case studies. You know, I always tell students about this. You know, like you're going through classes. Do you get term papers here? Absolutely, right? You get term papers? Okay, well, guess what? You can use those resources in terms of getting term papers. I'll give you an example. When I was getting my master's at Seton Hall University in human resources, I decided again to think about my experience in terms of law enforcement and human resources. So what I took on a topic was terrorism. And I did research on terrorism, because what happens is you have what you call international HR. How do you protect your employees overseas? What are the threats overseas? And so I put together a paper on international terrorism. Okay, and I used the resources from as is. Another example, when I was at Verizon, we used to have these conferences. They have affinity groups, you know, African American groups, Latino groups, and some of these groups will have a conference. For example, we have like 3,000 people over at a hotel, converging on a hotel for the company to go to this conference. We had Jesse Jackson one time. We had I can't think of his name right now. But the thing is, I was the person to go to put together the logistics of how do you protect people at conferences. especially when you may have some controversial speakers. So I also helped to put together the executive protection program while these dignitaries were at our conference, as well as trying to protect. And what did I use as a resource? As is has a library. Because I was a member, I could borrow those materials. One time I did a at Essex County Community College. I put together a program for forensic interviewing. You know, interviewing and interrogation, the techniques. What did I do? I went to the library and I got materials from As Is. I borrowed materials from As Is and I put together, you know, how do you do forensic interviewing? So I would strongly urge you to go on As Is, the American Society of Industrial Security student membership, and take advantage of that. They have conferences all over the place, you know, yearly conferences. But it's a great resource, especially you now that that you're in school to do term papers and do research papers. And also, it may help you to explore other career paths besides the public sector.
I have a question for Mr. DeHope. You just started as a dispatcher. Do you think it's a kind of a common possibility when someone doesn't know what to really do? I'm not sure if I want to become, but there is a position there and I want to apply. Would you recommend this just to something to learn about the field?
Absolutely. Some departments still like to hire their dispatchers to become police officers. In fact, my department still did it. They just hired a police officer as a dispatcher because it gives the department a better chance to get to know you as a worker, a person. And if you give that good, like Bobby said, if you give that good work ethic, they may hire you. Uh, it also will give you a great overview of how the police job works because basically as a dispatcher, you're the first line of defense. You're answering 911, you're taking just regular phone calls. So you're probably the most important person to a police officer because you have to give out the right information. You have to get the police officers rolling. So you actually hold a very important position as a dispatcher. And it can become a good stepping stone. Obviously, it's a good experience if you want to become a police officer.
Rachel, you have an experience in both states. What are your recommendations? What to be aware of in New Jersey, New York, when you're in the legal profession?
Well, first would be that you would need to take 2 bar exams, which isn't fun, but you're in the best position to do that right out of law school. So if you're thinking that you're not sure well, first of all, if you're thinking about being a lawyer and you're not exactly sure where you might want to practice and you're thinking it could be New York or New Jersey, I would recommend taking them both back to back. It was 3 days of testing when I did it because Randy, help me, what's the general day? Thank you. So, and I would recommend a bar review course, and in any event, you're ready at that point when you've taken the course and you're ready to take one, and that's probably the best way to do it, because it'll be harder at any other time to get your mind back in that way of thinking. But every state is different. The way they, state practice is different. So if you can think ahead, that would be the time probably to do it together at the same time. The only other recommendation I would have, which isn't related to your question, is writing. I can't emphasize enough the extent that writing plays in the practice of law. So much of what we do as lawyers is pen to paper. Cases are won on the paper. So few cases wind up actually in front of a judge in a courtroom. And if you can advocate for your client well in writing, you can win your case that way. You also can persuade your opponent if you know how to write a good letter. So if you're not doing writing now, I would recommend figuring out a way to write, just write. Take a writing class somewhere else if you're thinking of becoming a lawyer. Just figure out a way to supplement what you're doing. I know you're all so busy, but figure out a way to supplement what you're doing with some writing, because it will serve you well and your clients well should you practice law one day.
If I can just add to that, your writings will represent you. And I will not send out a letter or a decision or an official document unless somebody else has proved it. I'm very fortunate. My wife of 36 years was a teacher for 32 years and has very strong English skills. And I have to tell you, when your decision goes out and people look at it and it's properly worded, it fits properly on the page, it's the same way as you need to dress for the position you want, not for the position you have. But when you put that out there and they look at that, they'll say, this person really knows what they're doing, and it makes a big difference. So writing skills are very important. Having somebody else prove something before it goes out is very important.
I also like to ask you, each one of you, to say in 2-3 minutes the most memorable moment from your career.
Want me to go first?
I think you're going to start on that.
Yeah, sorry to say, yeah,
Good
kick
job.
back. Mine was the day I got called to go take blood work and the urine test to take the cop job. I was digging a ditch working for an electrical company, and there was 6 of us there. We go take the test, and I knew all the other 5 guys. The one kid looks at me and goes, "How you gonna do?" "Dude, I'm solid." He goes, "I was out till 4 o'clock this morning." We all take our P test, we all take our blood work. I go back to digging ditches and doing electrical work. I get a phone call from a trailer, before cell phones, by the way. It was my dad, called the work site and said, "Come home, the cops want you." Prior to leaving, I jumped ahead a little bit. Prior to leaving, the deputy chief of the police department told me, "Hey, you're 6th on the list. We're only going to take 5." So I left. And I was like, all right, but they already take my blood work, they already take my urine. The guy that was out till 4 o'clock in the morning failed the P test. I'm here. Okay. Right now, they're pulling hair for samples. Okay. If you run with a crew that's still blazing up every once in a while or whatever, you got to separate yourself if this is the career you're looking to take. Okay. I ran with a bunch of screw ups. I still consider them my friends. But they just chose a different life path. You're 19, 20 now. Start picking stuff what's important. Is it important to go smoke? Okay, well then, what if you get the job from a local place that says, "Oh, we're considering you." Certain other businesses are taking urine samples too now, so you're going to blow these opportunities. That guy could have had my life, but because of him being a screw up, I got my life. And I couldn't be any happier. So, if you think about things that are important to you, my very first day in an emergency room in Kearny, New Jersey, taking that test is probably the most important thing that ever happened to me in my career. And you have the chance to make sure your life turns out pretty cool. Just take advantage of it.
I don't have anything nearly
Well,
that
please.
interesting.
I can go on for hours about
I
me.
know. I'm sitting here, and I wish that I knew that question was going to come, because most memorable.
I'm going to hire to
Most
May.
memorable case.
Well, when I was litigating, I remember working really hard, arguing an appeal at the appellate division in New York, but for the life of me, I can't remember the case. I don't remember what the case was about. What was that?
Not memorable.
I know. This is what I'm saying. I've been practicing a long time, at 20 years, which is a really kind of a frightening thing. But I would just remember one of the reasons I didn't think I wanted to be a litigator was I get nervous speaking in public. And even though I am so anal with preparation, I am so prepared before I go into a court. I never tried a case, but I argued motions and I argued appeals, a handful. And just the nerves. But I remember preparing, the justices asking me questions. I handled them well. We won. It was a very exciting day. I think also overcoming the fear of public speaking. And the only way you do that is by doing the public speaking. So in my city job for the when I worked for the New York City Housing Authority IG, I did corruption prevention training for all the new employees, basically telling them how not to get in trouble and how they had a duty to report cases of fraud, and if they didn't, they could lose their jobs. It's very different when you work for the public versus the private. There are things you must do, there are things you may not do, and I would do this weekly training, and it was a real feeling of accomplishment that I was able to not want to vomit every time I did it. So I guess that's something. It's not very exciting, but just overcoming that fear and winning that appeal.
Well, mine doesn't deal directly with law enforcement, but it was a result, again, my experiences. There was a real tough case. A person by the name of Zaidi was the person's name, and he was threatening to go public for Verizon in terms of he had some sort of convoluted allegations, and so to support his case, this guy wrote a lot of material. So he brings in a hand truck with 5 boxes full of documents and writings. My job was it was a discrimination case, by the way, and a conspiracy case. And I had to go through all those documents. And what happened was, because this was at a very high level, the company was immobilized. The company was actually afraid of this individual. So I went before company executives, all these company executives. I was just a little, chain and link way down here, and I was able to investigate that case and come to a conclusion and convince the company that this guy, all this material really was harmless. And so I got them to move off of this immobility and actually sanction this individual. And that's all because of the investigatory skills and my ability to argue my points. So that was my most memorable.
Well, after 25 years as a police officer and chief, you could say, and Bobby, almost every day you go to work, you have some type of memorable experience. You're dealing with anything. It could be the birth of a child. I delivered a baby. CPR, and then meeting the person you saved their life a little later. Memorable. Unfortunately, finding, just almost every day can bring something memorable. I would say my most memorable experience is, unfortunately, a good friend of mine became a heroin addict, and he had called me up to come talk to him because he was going to finally take the step to clean himself up and go to rehab. And he was basically crying on my shoulder, everything, and I, talked to him to get him to go. And unfortunately, that night, after I left work, he overdosed. Except someone I worked with was able to save him and bring him back. And the next day, when I saw him, once again, he was crying and everything. And I told him, I thought you were going to, clean up, go to rehab. And he said he just wanted one last hit. Fortunately, almost killed him. But I was able to take him to rehab, and to this day, he is still clean. He cleaned his act up. It's 10 years ago, and he never looked back. He's still clean. And, I would see him almost every day walking, but he was able to keep his self clean. So, that's very memorable to me.
I think my most memorable experience was the first trial that I lost, and it was my first trial in front of a jury. And I think why it had such an impact on me is that as you've heard, you can prepare for hours, you can work as hard as you can work, and you know going into a situation that it just might not work out well for you. And in my case, when I try cases, I can't pick my facts. I can't pick the facts that are making up the crime I'm trying. I can't pick the judge. I can't pick my adversary or the opposing counsel. There's a lot of factors that are out of my control, but it doesn't change how I approach every case I have and every trial I do, which is you work as hard as you can, you give it 1,000%, you go in there, you make yourself proud, you represent your office or your organization well, and you do your best. And sometimes you're going to have setbacks. Sometimes things are not going to go the way that you would hope them to go. And when that happens, you learn from it. You get better, you get smarter, you get sharper. You take what could be a very negative experience and draw from it every positive that you can take from it and turn it around and keep doing better next time, and keep realistic about the fact that there will be setbacks and there will be things that get in your way, some roadblocks, some obstacles. And when you get to those points, don't just shut down, don't just turn away, keep going, keep working through them, and just keep doing your best no matter what, because sometimes that's really all you can do, is just do your best. You're going to be confronted with situations in life where there are things outside of your control, outside of your power, and even though you'd like them to be different, you have to just bring what you can to the table and make the best out of every situation.
I would have to say that I also delivered a baby, and but if I wasn't there, maybe somebody else would have delivered that baby. I probably saved a lot of lives, but I always felt that, if another guy was working, another woman was working, they would have saved that life. You remember the ones you lost, the ones that you didn't save, and that's tough. And having to do death notifications as a detective, there were a lot of things, but do the best you can do. No matter what you decide to do in life, you are not better than the people that you serve. And really, as public servants, which we all are, you need to serve the public, and you need to make the right decision. And the other thing that I think you'll notice about the panel, we're not getting paid to be here. We're volunteers, and I'm involved in a lot of different volunteer organizations. And if you're fortunate enough to have what you have, you need to give back. And that might just be helping some woman put her groceries in the car today instead of walking by her. But when you have people come up and tell you that you changed their lives, that you impacted their lives, that's what's memorable.
Just have one sentence. Speaking what the judge says, it's kind of funny because he and I, we were in school together, Rockland College, when we were your age. And back then, did we know what we were going to do?
No.
No. Did we have fun?
We did.
We did. And that's something that you have to take with you, right? Make your jobs fun. I'm sure everybody on this panel say that there is a lot of good fun in it. But again, with some of the technology that we have today, it's so important. Look at yourself. Make sure that when it comes to Facebook, when it comes to social media, when it comes to technology, people, you're better off taking this phone and shut down. And other things you got to remember, with investigations that we have today, you got to remember, like I really stressed in my classes, especially if you're down in the city, right? We are living, unfortunately, in a world after 9/11, right? Every place we go, you're going to be photographed. So I tell everybody, smile at the camera. Okay. But again, students here, I really want to thank you, and let's have a nice warm applause for our panel.